The CEO smirked and introduced me as the one who almost ruined the deal. Laughter didn't follow. That was the point. The boardroom stayed still. Glass walls catching the gray of a Chicago morning while the partner studied the table like he was deciding where to cut. The CEO let the silence work, then tilted his head toward me as if I were an object on loan. The words had already done their job. I felt them land where my name used to be. The CFO leaned forward. Irritation sharpened into a smile. They hadn't fired me yet, he said. They wanted the partner to see my face. A warning label. I kept my posture neutral. Hands flat, pulse steady. When the CEO told me to pour water, it wasn't a request. It was theater. I stood and moved around the table. The partner didn't look up. His pen stayed capped. As I set the glass down, I slid a tiny folded marker beneath the coaster small enough to disappear, precise enough to be found by the only person who would notice. I didn't rush. I didn't apologize. I went back to my seat. My name is Marin Caldwell. I am 38 years old. The sentence formed inside me without ceremony, stitched into the moment like a brace. Years of compliance work had taught me what mattered when rooms turned hostile. Control your body. Track the exits. Watch the hands. The CEO's fingers were laced behind his head. The CFO's knee bounced. The partner finally looked up. They wanted my face attached to failure. Fine. Let it be the last face they see before this collapses. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't smile. He glanced at the documents, then at me, then back at the CEO. Interesting, he said, and let the words sit until it felt heavier than the table. Then he asked if I had personally approved the final risk assessment. The room tightened. No one moved to answer. Someone cleared their throat and stopped. I kept my eyes on the partner, measuring the space between what they were pretending and what the records would show. This story is a work of fiction created by our writing team. I felt the shift before it became visible, the moment when a public joke turns into a private problem, and I understood the game they were playing well enough to know what it would cost me if I stayed quiet. Why were they pretending I had signed something I never approved? I didn't go back to my desk. I logged in from the conference room while they were still deciding whether to keep talking over each other or pretend nothing had happened. The file opened clean. Too clean. My name sat at the bottom of the approval page. Aligned perfectly. Dated correctly. Stamped with final authority. The problem wasn't the placement. It was the trail. The metadata didn't breathe the way mine did. The timing was off. The sequence skipped a step I never skipped. A message popped up in the corner of my screen. You should let this go. It came from the person who had taught me how to read these systems. My closest internal advisor, the one who used to tell me where the bodies were buried and which ones were still warm. I typed back that I needed clarification on the approval chain. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. You're making this worse. The reply came. For yourself. The fear landed late. The betrayal landed first. I didn't delete anything. I didn't correct the signature or flag the report. I adjusted the logic around it. Quiet and precise, the way we were trained to do when regulators might be watching. If the document was accessed from outside the internal range, the values would shift just enough to expose the reach. Nothing obvious. Nothing dramatic. Just a record that could not be explained away. Another message. Shorter this time? Stop digging. I leaned back and watched the access logs refresh. Someone was already checking whether the ground had moved. What if the evidence against me hadn't been planted by the people who hated me, but by the one person who knew exactly how to make it stick? The door opened without a knock. My advisor stood there, face neutral, hands empty. He glanced at the screen and then at me, like we were sharing a private joke that had gone stale. You don't want this fight, he said, not unkindly. I met his eyes and waited. Silence has a way of demanding more than questions ever do. He exhaled. Sharp. They need a clean file. I saved my changes and closed the system. The room felt smaller, but the path forward didn't. Whatever they thought they had finished, they had just reopened. I pulled the personnel archive the way you pull a thread you already know will come loose. Names first, titles second, departure reasons last. The pattern didn't show up until I stopped looking for it. Resigned. Mutual separation. Role eliminated. I opened the first file and found the lawsuit tucked behind the exit memo. Personal liability. Professional negligence. The second file had the same structure. The third didn't bother hiding it. Bank records attached. Settlements that chewed through savings and then kept going. None of them landed somewhere else in the industry. None of them ever testified. I called legal and asked, lightly, whether there was a retention policy for post-employment litigation. The line stayed quiet long enough to register. Then a voice I recognized slid in. Careful. Why are you asking curiosity? That's not a good reason. I ended the call without arguing. Curiosity wasn't the issue. Silence was. Every file told the same story once you read past the labels. No clean exits, no soft landings, just pressure applied until someone cracked and signed. I traced one case deeper than the rest. A compliance lead who flagged a routing anomaly and got sued within weeks. The money trail jumped accounts, crossed borders, came back thinner and quieter. A few transfers brushed against a familiar counterparty. Sterling's firm sat at the edge of it. Close enough to touch, far enough to deny. My phone buzzed. A message from my advisor, stripped down to a single line. Drop it. I stared at the screen and felt the floor tilt. If the people before me hadn't resigned, what if they had been erased? The thought sharpened everything. This wasn't about losing a job. It was about criminal exposure wrapped in paperwork, clean enough to pass an audit if no one pushed back. I pushed back and watched the logs update again. Someone was checking my access. Another message came through. This one from an unfamiliar number. We should talk. Privately, I closed the archive and stood. Whatever was moving had noticed me noticing, and that meant the window was closing. Sterling didn't bother closing the door. He stood just inside it, hands empty, eyes already on me like he'd been in the room longer than I had. I know you didn't sign. He said, I want to know where the original is. No greeting, no context. The words landed flat and deliberate. I didn't answer right away. Silence makes people reveal what they think they're hiding. He took a step closer, scanning the desk, the screen, the outlets. You're careful, he added. That's why this is awkward. I don't keep originals. I replied, I keep trails. A corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile. More like approval with conditions. Yeah, you're not wrong, but trails can be redirected. Originals can't. That was the moment it clicked. He wasn't asking out of concern. He was inventorying damage, measuring how much the fall would cost him and how cheaply he could buy the wreckage afterward. He leaned back against the table. When this company cracks, it will do it fast. Markets hate surprises. Boards panic. Prices drop. And you're here to catch the knife. I'm here to make sure it falls where I can reach it. The room felt smaller. Not because of him. Because of what he was assuming I would do next. You need me documented as the mistake, I said. Clean enough to pass scrutiny. His eyes stayed on mine. I need inevitability. The pressure sharpened. He already knew about the forged approval. He already knew legal would move before facts did. He was waiting to see if I would protect myself or protect the fiction. Was he waiting for me to fall or offering me a way out? He straightened, checked his watch. You should decide quickly. Systems close ranks when they smell blood. I don't bleed easily. I said, another almost smile. That's why this will be interesting. He turned for the door. Paused. If you move anything, he added, without looking back, make sure it's something that can't be put back. The door stayed open after he left. I didn't close it. I pulled up the access logs instead and watched a new line appear. External and impatient. The calendar invite arrived marked urgent and non-optional. No agenda. Just a time and a list of names that told me how this would end if I let it. The boardroom filled faster than usual. Legal took a seat and didn't look up. IT joined remotely. Camera off. The CEO stood instead of sitting, which meant this wasn't a discussion. It was a decision waiting to be read aloud. We're here to address a breakdown in process, he began. Specifically, conduct that puts the company at risk. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder where my records lived. The screen stalled. The folder refreshed. Empty. I tried again. A system message blinked once and vanished. Access denied. My phone buzzed onto the table. An internal alert I hadn't seen before. Permissions updated. I raised my head. My files are gone. The CFO didn't blink. Then they weren't compliant. I switched to the audit server. Same result. Legal shifted papers. Careful not to meet my eyes. Someone on the board cleared their throat and said my name like it was a formality they'd already signed. This will be handled as a disciplined termination. The CEO continued. Clean, professional. Based on what? I asked, keeping my voice level. A pause. Not for thought. For alignment. Based on the final report. Legal said at last. The one on record. I looked at the blank screen and felt the weight move. Not toward me. Away from me. The system had closed its doors and left me standing outside with my hands full of air. What if the only safe proof was never digital at all? I shut the laptop and folded my hands on the table. The CEO watched for a reaction that didn't come. The silence stretched until it made him uncomfortable. We'll proceed, he said. Proceed, I echoed, and stood before anyone could stop me. I need 1 minute. He frowned. For what? To confirm something, I replied. If this is finalized, there's no reason to preserve what you just erased. The room shifted. IT unmuted. Then muted again. Legal's pen stopped moving. I walked out without waiting for permission, already reaching for the only proof that they hadn't touched yet. I powered down the company laptop and slid it into my bag like it was already evidence. My phone followed. Work devices go dark fast when you stop asking permission. The printer in my office whirred once and went quiet. I stacked the pages while the ink was still warm. Audit trails, access logs, approval paths that never converged the way they were supposed to. The paper felt heavier than the screen ever did. I tucked the stack into a plain folder and sealed it with a clip I'd kept for years without knowing why. A knock hit the doorframe. Not a request. The advisor leaned in, eyes scanning the desk for a glow that wasn't there. You're making this worse, he said, softer than before. Only if it stays quiet, I replied, and turned the desk drawer so he could see the recorder. Analog, red light off. The implication landed before the explanation ever would. His jaw tightened. That won't save you. It doesn't need to. I said, it needs to be boring. He stepped back. The space between us widened, and with it the certainty that he couldn't touch what he couldn't trace. I opened a secure channel on my personal device and confirmed the last setting. If my access was revoked, if my badge stopped working, if my termination processed, a package would leave on its own. Not dramatic, just thorough. The destination didn't need an introduction. Who would panic first once they realized I wasn't afraid? My phone vibrated. A message from legal, short and clean. Please return to the boardroom. I didn't answer. I packed the folder and stood. The hall outside my office felt different when I stepped into it, less like a corridor, more like a funnel. People looked up and then looked away. Someone tried to smile and missed. The elevator doors closed and opened again on my floor. I walked past the boardroom and kept going. If they wanted me present, they could come find me. I pressed send on one last confirmation and felt the line go live. Behind me, voices rose, then cut off. The system had noticed the change. I didn't wait for permission or a reply. I drafted the message while the hallway noise behind my office thickened into something frantic and unfocused. No greetings, no explanations. Just a file and a short note. The attachment wasn't about my company. It was about a clean scenario built from public filings and timing he couldn't dispute. If the deal went through as structured, the tax exposure would surface within a single reporting cycle, deferred liabilities turning visible, questions he wouldn't be able to outrun. I didn't frame it as a threat. I framed it as math. I read it once and sent it before doubt could ask for edits. The response came faster than I expected. You're crossing a line. I didn't apologize. You already crossed it. I'm just showing you where it ends. A pause long enough to feel intentional. Then a second message. Shorter. You're assuming I didn't know. I'm assuming you didn't calculate the timing. I typed back. or the way your signature aligns with the exposure. The typing indicator flickered, stopped, flickered again. I watched it like a pulse. If saving him from this bought me leverage, what did insurance cost? The reply landed without preamble. You're not an employee, you're insurance. The words changed the air. Not relief, not safety, alignment. He wasn't offering protection. He was acknowledging value, the kind that doesn't sit on payroll. Another message followed. Sharper. The board will try to move quickly. They'll want a clean ending. I don't do clean endings. I wrote, I do contained ones. Silence. Then a final line. Be available. I locked my phone and slid it face down. Outside. Someone knocked and didn't wait. The advisor's voice cut through the door. Brittle now. They're asking for you. I stood and straightened the folder under my arm. If Sterling was repositioning, the board would feel it before they understood it. I opened the door and stepped into the noise, already measuring how fast the pressure would shift once the hunter realized he was part of the collateral. The CEO stood before anyone else could claim the floor. Papers aligned, voice measured, the posture of someone who believed the outcome had already been approved. We're concluding this, he began, eyes cutting toward me. Effective immediately, Sterling raised a finger. Not high, just enough. I'll sign, he said. On one condition. The room stalled. Even the air seemed to wait. The CEO recovered first. Of course, we're open to reasonable terms. Sterling didn't look at him. His gaze stayed on me. Marin Caldwell will oversee all funds tied to this deal. Full visibility, final authority. A chair scraped. Someone whispered a name and stopped. Equal authority. Sterling added. To the chief executive. Silence hardened. The CEO's smile thinned into something brittle. Legal shifted. Pages turning without turning. I felt the weight settle where it had never been allowed to sit before. The CEO tried to laugh it off. That's not standard. Neither is forging approvals. Sterling replied, calm and precise. Standards are flexible when risk is real. Every face turned to me. Expectations sharpened into demand. The offer sat there, clean and public. Power wrapped in legitimacy. The kind that comes with applause later and knives earlier. What would you do if power was handed to you publicly? I stood. No, I said. The word landed heavier than any contract. The CEO blinked. You're refusing oversight. I'm refusing the role. I corrected. I won't stabilize something you intend to keep broken. Sterling studied me. Not surprised. Name your terms. I don't want authority here, I replied. I want distance. A murmur broke loose. The CEO stepped forward. Anger slipping through. You don't get to dictate, Sterling. Cut him off again. She does. Or I walk. The CEO froze. The board stared at the table like it might explain this away. I felt the balance tip. Not toward me, but away from them. I'm done being the fix. I said, find another one. Sterling nodded once. Approval without attachment. He closed his folder and stood. Then we proceed differently. I gathered my things and turned for the door. Behind me, voices collided, sharp and panicked. Ahead of me, the hallway waited. And whatever came next was already moving. I didn't wait for them to call me back in. I walked to my office, pulled the envelope from the bottom drawer, and headed for legal. The CEO caught up at the doorway. His smile had dropped the pretense. This doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't, I replied, and handed the envelope across the table. It's already done. He opened it, scanning faster than he meant to. The date at the top landed hard. 2 days earlier. His jaw tightened. You planned this. I prepared for it. Legal looked from the page to me. You're resigning effective immediately. Yes. The CEO leaned in. You think this protects you? I think it keeps me clean. A pause stretched. The advisor stood in the corner, hands folded, watching the floor like it might offer instructions. Legal cleared her throat. There are reporting obligations. Already met? I said, the evidence was submitted through an encrypted channel. The CEO's eyes flicked up. To whom? Appropriately. His breath hitched. The room shifted again. Smaller this time? He straightened. Trying to find leverage that wasn't there. You're bluffing. I slid my phone across the table and unlocked it. A single confirmation sat on the screen. No details, no signatures, just time-stamped acknowledgement. Sterling secured the channel, I added. And watch that name do its work. The CEO's face went still, then pale. The advisor's head snapped up. You involved him. The CEO said, quieter now. He involved himself. What if leaving was the real victory? Legal gathered the papers. Careful again. We'll need your badge. I placed it on the table. The sound was small but final. The CEO looked at it like it might explode. This started days ago, he said, more to himself than to me. It started when you needed someone to take the fall. I replied, and stood before he could recover. I just stopped standing underneath. As I turned for the door, my phone vibrated once. A short message. Be ready. I didn't answer. I walked out into the hall and kept moving, knowing the noise would catch up soon enough. The cafe was louder than the boardroom had ever been. Cups clinked. A barista called out names. Someone laughed too hard at a corner table. I sat near the window with my phone face up, hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched. The notification didn't arrive gently. Breaking news: federal investigators had opened a formal inquiry. The company's name was there, spelled correctly. The CEO's title followed it. Then the words under investigation. No adjectives. No speculation. Just fact. I exhaled. Not relief. Something closer to release. A man at the next table glanced at my screen and then looked away. Polite enough not to stare. No one knew what that headline had cost, or what it had spared. That was fine. Winning didn't need witnesses. My phone buzzed again. Sterling this time. One line. Clean separation. You did what you needed to do. I didn't reply. I didn't owe him closure. I took a sip of coffee and felt my shoulders drop for the first time in days. They introduced me as the one who almost ruined the deal. They were wrong. I was the one who ended it. The lesson came without drama, the way real lessons usually do. If you stay quiet in a system that needs someone to take the blame, you won't be rewarded for loyalty. You'll be chosen for sacrifice. Boundaries aren't attitudes, they're actions. And they matter most when power is trying to buy your silence. I paid the check and stood. Outside. The city kept moving. Indifferent and solid. That felt right. I walked until the noise softened and the day caught up with me. If you stayed with me through this, thank you. I know stories like this can hit close to home. If you've been in a room where the truth was inconvenient, I'd like to hear how you handled it. Share your thoughts below if you want. And if you're interested in more stories about holding your ground when it counts, feel free to stick around. I'll be here, doing the same. The applause hadn't even died when the folder hit the table hard enough to splash red wine across the linen. For half a second, I thought it was a joke, some clumsy attempt at drama during a victory dinner. Core Sync had just closed its biggest deployment. Glasses were raised. Someone laughed too loud. Then the room tilted. The CEO stood, not smiling. His hand still resting on the folder like he was claiming territory. He didn't look at the team. He looked at me. The word freeloader landed first. Not shouted. Measured. The kind of word you use when you want it to stick. He flipped the folder open and tapped a page with his knuckle. Ransomware-style code signatures. Client exposure. Risk. Liability. Each word dropped with intent. Spaced just enough for the phones to come out. Chairs shifted. A fork clinked against a plate and stopped. Someone near the window whispered my name, then went quiet. My phone buzzed against my palm. One vibration, then another. Access revoked. Effective immediately. The screen dimmed like it was embarrassed for me. Security didn't rush. They never do. They waited for him to finish. When they stepped closer, the distance between us felt final, like a line had been drawn and crossed at the same time. I stood because it was easier than sitting there while strangers decided what I was. My name is Annie. I am 36 years old. The thought came uninvited as I took a breath I didn't trust, standing under the restaurant lights that suddenly felt too bright. 36 years of building systems that didn't lie, reduced to a folder and a pause. I started toward the exit. That's when a voice came from the next table. calm enough to cut through the noise. You left a very distinctive technical fingerprint. I turned. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lower it either. Just met my eyes like we were finishing a conversation that had started long before tonight. Too distinctive for an amateur. The guard cleared his throat. The door opened. Cold air rushed in from the street. Sharp and real. This story is a fictional work created by our writing team, inspired by themes of power, control, and consequence. Outside, the night swallowed the sound of the room behind me. My phone stayed dark. My hands stopped shaking. Not because I felt safe, but because something else had taken over focus. Sharp and unwelcome. If I didn't plant the code, who did the door to my apartment didn't fight me when I pushed it open? And that was the first thing that felt wrong. I went straight to my laptop. Habit. Muscle memory. The screen came on clean. Too clean. No folders. No local backups. The private repository I kept mirrored off the company network was empty. Like it had never existed. My name was gone from the commit history, replaced by service accounts and generic handles. Months of work reassigned with a few quiet keystrokes. I laughed once. Short. Sharp. Then I noticed the desk drawer. I never leave it open. The drawer was half out. The papers inside were shuffled, edges uneven. I crouched and ran my hand along the floor. A scuff mark where something heavy had been dragged? The closet door wasn't fully shut. Neither was the cabinet under the sink. Someone had been here. My phone buzzed before I could stand. Unknown number. Annie? The voice was calm. Practiced. This is Detective Morales. We're downstairs. I didn't ask how they got in the building. I didn't ask why. I opened the door again and watched two uniforms step inside like they owned the place. Morales didn't look at me at first. He looked around. The desk. The open drawer. The laptop. We're following up on a report connected to a data breach, he said, finally meeting my eyes. Specifically, a removable storage device. Red, thumb-sized. I shook my head. I don't use external drives. He waited. That pause wasn't for me to think. It was for me to panic. Our information says it was last seen in your possession. The other officer added, already writing something down. My chest tightened, but my mind went oddly clear. This wasn't about tonight. This wasn't about optics or boardroom theater. Someone had crossed a line that didn't come with press releases. If they were confident enough to send the police to my door, what else had they already decided I'd done? I don't have it, I said. I never did. Morales studied my face like he was measuring something. Then he nodded. Slow. If you remember anything else, you'll call. They left without taking anything. That was worse. I locked the door and leaned my forehead against it, listening to my own breathing steady out. Career damage I could handle. Reputation. Even. This was different. This was about making me radioactive. I went back to the desk and pulled the drawer all the way out. Something small had been moved recently. Not taken. Checked. Who searches for evidence I never had and leaves nothing behind? The receptionist didn't ask my name. She looked at my phone, then at the door behind her, and stepped aside. Julian Hale didn't stand when I walked in. He stayed seated, hands flat on the desk, like he was waiting for a result he already expected. You're not here to convince me you're innocent, he said, eyes steady. If that's your plan, save us both the time. I sat because he didn't offer anything else. Then why am I here? He slid a tablet across the desk. Not toward me, just far enough that I could see the screen light up. Core sync, he said. Still running? Still bleeding. I didn't touch it. They accused me of planting malicious code. I know, he nodded once. That's not why they fired you. Silence stretched? Not awkward. Calculated. They needed someone to absorb blame. He continued. Someone technical. Someone visible. And someone who wouldn't survive a regulatory sweep. My jaw tightened. You're saying they framed me. I'm saying they plan to erase you. He leaned back. Different thing. I crossed my arms. So what do you want access? The word landed clean. Not to clear your name. Not to fight them in public. I want what they're hiding. My pulse spiked. You want me to break back into their system. I want you to retrieve the data they buried. He tapped the tablet. Anonymized client streams, off-platform transfers, black market sales dressed up as optimization. I stared at the screen, then back at him. You're asking me to commit a crime. I'm asking you to expose one. His mouth didn't move much when he spoke. There's a difference. The room felt smaller. The police at my door, the open drawer, the red drive I'd never owned. If I walk away now, who else do they destroy next? Julian watched my face like he was reading a dashboard. You don't do this, he said. Softer now. They keep selling. And you stay radioactive. I stood. My legs felt solid again. I don't do this for you. A thin smile. Of course not. I reached the door and stopped. If I do this, I said, not turning around, I control how deep it goes. He didn't answer right away. Then, that's the only reason I called you. I opened the door. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A new alert. Internal systems activity. CoreSync had just pushed an emergency patch. I didn't go to him because I trusted him. I went because he was the only one who would still pick up. He opened the door a crack. Chain still on. Eyes darting past me into the hallway. When he saw it was just me, he closed it fast and leaned against the wood like it might give way. You shouldn't be here, he muttered. Already walking back toward the kitchen, I followed. His hands wouldn't stay still. He wiped them on his jeans, then reached for a glass, then stopped halfway. I pulled my laptop out and set it on the table between us. You were on the access rotation the night the signature appeared. He froze. I checked the logs. I went on. Not the ones they showed the board. The raw ones. There's a gap. 2 minutes. Only one credential touched that branch. His shoulders sagged. The fight drained out of him all at once. They told me you were already done. He said quietly that the decision was made. I waited. Silence pressed down harder than any accusation. They gave me your credentials. He finally said, temporary elevation. Clean trail. They said it would look like an automated process. He swallowed. They said you'd be erased anyway. They just needed it clean. My chest tightened, but my voice didn't shake. So you framed me. His head snapped up. I didn't have a choice. I slid the screen toward him, then explained this. Why the signature was tweaked to look sloppy. Almost personal. His eyes filled. He covered his face with both hands. They have my sister, he said into his palms. Not here. Offshore. They call it a holding arrangement. No charges, no paperwork, just men who answer phones and don't give names. The room felt too small for the air in it. What kind of system makes betrayal the safest option? He looked up, eyes red. They said if I didn't do it, she wouldn't make it back. I closed the laptop. You didn't just give them my name? I said, you gave them leverage. He nodded once. They're rolling out an emergency patch. Tonight? They're scared. That was new. I stood. They think the mess is contained. He added, panic creeping back into his voice. If they finish that patch, they won't. I cut in. I walked to the door. My phone buzzed again. CoreSync deployment window confirmed. Julian didn't comment while I rebuilt CoreSync on his private servers. He just watched the dashboards change color. Watched the error rates drop. Watched the system settle the way it always had when it was allowed to run clean. They're filing. He said finally, eyes still on the screen. The notice hit my inbox seconds later. Intellectual property theft. Unauthorized replication. Injunctive relief. They wanted everything shut down. Sealed. Buried. They're confident. Julian added, that should worry you, it doesn't. I said, already closing the message. It helps. The hearing was remote. 3 faces in neat boxes. Corporate counsel spoke first, calm and rehearsed, painting me as reckless, emotional, dangerous. When it was my turn, I didn't fight the framing. I acknowledged the architecture overlap. I admitted the foundation was mine. I didn't contest their claim to interim ownership. Julian's jaw tightened. He didn't interrupt. The ruling came fast. Partial injunction, limited scope, a small loss, exactly where it needed to be. After the call ended, Julian turned to me. You just handed them leverage. I shook my head. I handed them a problem they can't solve without me. Core Sync was already buckling under the patch they rushed through the night before. Error cascades, latency spikes, clients complaining louder by the hour. To stabilize it, they'd have to pull in the original routing logic. My logic, the part they never fully understood but always depended on. They'd reintegrate it under emergency authority. No review, no scrutiny, just survival. Julian leaned back, eyes narrowing. They'll think you folded. They already do. I said, that's the point. The notification came less than an hour later. Internal deployment request, temporary access window, read-only. They claimed. I laughed under my breath. Read-only was a courtesy, not a boundary. As the credentials populated on my screen, a single question pressed in. Sharp and steady. What exactly did I just let back into their system? Julian stood. Once you step through this door, there's no clean exit. I didn't look up. There was never going to be one. The access token finished initializing. Core Sync came into focus. Live and fragile, waiting for the wrong kind of help. Julian didn't soften it. They're leaning on me, he said. Voice flat, regulators, partners, people who don't like surprises. I stayed quiet. Silence was the only leverage I had left. I'm pulling funding. He continued. Effective now. The line went dead before I could respond. No explanation. No apology. Just absence. My phone lit up again. This time with an internal alert I wasn't supposed to see anymore. Unauthorized system access. Active investigation. My name attached to it like a warning label. They weren't just angry. They were scared. I ducked into a cafe off Lower Wacker because it was loud and anonymous and didn't care who I was. I ordered something cheap I didn't taste and took the seat farthest from the counter. Public Wi-Fi. Shared outlets. Faces that didn't look twice. My laptop came up slow. I didn't rush it. Rushing was how people made mistakes. A message slid onto the screen. Unknown sender. One sentence. You should stop. I didn't reply. I closed the window and watched the network traffic spike. Then settle. Core Sync was straining again. The reintegrated architecture was doing exactly what it always did when it wasn't being strangled. It was correcting things they didn't want corrected. Another alert, then another. Access attempts failing. Someone was trying to lock me out for good. What do you do when even your ally cuts the rope? My hand stopped shaking, not because I felt safe, because the options had narrowed enough to be clear. Attacking them head-on had only made them tighten their grip. Every move I made showed up as intent. And intent was something they could prosecute. I closed my editor and opened a new branch. Not an exploit. Not a breach. Something quieter. Something they would have to accept if they wanted the system to keep breathing. The barista called out an order. I didn't look up. Another message came through. This one official. Mandatory stability update requested. Immediate deployment required. I smiled. Just a little. If they wanted me gone, they should have stopped asking me to save them. The request came through with no pretense left. Mandatory stability patch. Immediate deployment. Executive override. I opened the call they'd left running in the background. No greetings, no pleasantries. We don't have time for experiments. The CEO snapped. His voice was tight now, stripped of the confidence he'd worn at the steakhouse. Push the fix. I scanned the live metrics while he talked. Error rates climbing, transactions queuing, clients timing out. This patch won't change performance. I said, it won't make you look better. A pause, then a sharper edge. It will keep us alive. That was the truth. Finally out in the open. I uploaded the update without ceremony. No new features. No visible safeguards. Just a quiet adjustment to how the system observed itself. A mirror, not a blade. Someone on the call laughed, short and relieved. That's it. That's it, I confirmed. They deployed it within minutes. No review, no audit. Survival always skips the checklist. The dashboard steadied. The room on the other end exhaled. Voices overlapped, already moving on to spin and damage control. What if the most dangerous weapon doesn't destroy anything at all? I watched the first anomaly flag itself. Not an alert. A record. Time-stamped. Routed. Logged outside their control. Then another. And another. Each one triggered its own report. Anonymized and automatic. Sent to places that didn't answer to press releases or emergency patches. A message popped up from legal. You didn't add any outbound connections. No, I replied. The system already had them. Silence followed. The kind that meant someone was checking something they didn't want to understand. The CEO came back on the line. Voice lower now. You said this wouldn't change anything. It doesn't. I said, it just stops hiding things. The call ended without a goodbye. I closed my laptop and packed it away. Outside. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Notifications stacking faster than I could read. Somewhere inside CoreSync, the mirror was working. Patient and precise, turning every dirty move into a witness that couldn't be fired. They didn't invite me to the press conference. They didn't need to. I watched the live stream from my laptop. Volume low, fingers still. The CEO stood at the podium like nothing had touched him. Calm voice, confident shoulders, recovery, stability, enhanced security. The words came easy when no one interrupted. Behind him, the screen lit up with clean charts, green arrows, smoothed curves. Exactly what the room wanted to see. Applause started early. Then the screen blinked. Once, twice, a murmur rippled through the crowd. The CEO glanced back, smile tightening but still in place. Someone off camera said something sharp. The charts didn't return. Instead, a list appeared. No graphics. Just rows, accounts, dates, amounts spelled out in full. Transfers looping through shells that didn't exist on paper. Lines connecting where no connections were supposed to be. The CEO stepped away from the podium. That's not part of the presentation. The microphone picked it up anyway. The list kept scrolling. Transaction chains expanded. A name surfaced near the top, bolded by the system itself. His name, labeled cleanly, without commentary, originator. A woman in the front row stood up. Phone already recording. What am I looking at? No one answered her. The CEO's mouth opened, then closed. Security moved, but not toward the screen. Toward him. What happens when the truth interrupts a live press conference? I leaned back and folded my arms. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel victory. I felt the weight shift. Slow and irreversible. The stream cut for a moment. When it came back, the podium was empty. Voices overlapped off camera. A man in a dark suit spoke into his phone. Eyes fixed on the screen like it might accuse him next. My inbox started filling. Reporters, regulators, unknown addresses with no greeting and no patience. I closed the laptop before I could read any of it. Outside the frame, the system kept talking, methodical and precise, naming what it had always known. And for the first time since this started, they couldn't mute it. The video replayed everywhere. Different angles, same moment. The CEO stepping back from the podium, his hands closed around his arms. The sound cut before anyone could ask questions. Julian found me an hour later. He didn't knock. He never did. He stood in the doorway of the conference room I'd borrowed. Jacket off now. Sleeves rolled like that made him approachable. You did what I asked, he said. And more. I didn't look up from my screen. Messages kept stacking. Regulators. Reporters. People who hadn't known my name yesterday suddenly spelling it carefully. You controlled the narrative, he continued. That's rare. I closed the laptop. Say what you came to say. He smiled. Not wide. Calculated. Come with me. We roll this into something permanent. Chief Technology Officer. Full authority. Clean slate. I watched him for a long second. The room felt smaller again. What if the person who saved you was just waiting his turn? His smile slipped. Just a fraction. You didn't save me, I said. You rented me. Julian exhaled through his nose. You think walking away keeps you clean? I know it does. He stepped closer. You need protection. Deals like this don't end quietly. I met his eyes. Check your phone. He hesitated, then pulled it out. The color drained from his face as he read. He looked up slowly. You wouldn't, he said. I already did. My voice stayed even. 5 minutes before you walked in, the silence stretched until it hurt. You used me, I added. You just assumed I wouldn't notice. Julian straightened his jacket, the confidence trying to find its way back. You just burned a lot of bridges. No, I said. I refused to stand on them. I stood and walked past him. He didn't try to stop me outside. The noise was rising again. Sirens. Questions. Consequences. I headed toward the exit. Phone buzzing in my pocket. Already pulling me toward whatever came next. The wind off Lake Michigan cut straight through my jacket. Sharp enough to keep me present. I sat on the concrete steps with my phone face down beside me, letting the quiet do its work. The charges were dropped that morning. No ceremony, no apology. Just a short email that said there was no longer sufficient cause to proceed. My name cleared in the same understated way it had been dragged through the mud. No title followed. No offer. No one clapped. A message came in anyway. A former client. One line. You built the only system that ever told us the truth. I stared at it longer than I needed to. Not because I wanted validation, but because it landed clean. No conditions attached. Another notification buzzed. An unknown number. I ignored it. I didn't owe anyone access anymore. They thought deleting my code would erase me. They were wrong. Code can be copied, buried, rewritten. The thing that mattered never lived on a server. It lived in the way I made decisions when pressure showed up and shortcuts looked tempting. I stood and brushed the grit from my hands. The city kept moving behind me. It always would. I didn't need a seat at their table. I built my own. If you let other people define your value, they will rewrite it the moment it becomes inconvenient. The only protection that lasts is knowing where your line is and refusing to cross it. Even when walking away costs you everything in the moment. Thanks for staying with me through this story. If any part of it felt familiar, I'd like to hear what stood out to you. Leave a comment and share your take. If you want more stories like this, where boundaries matter and choices have weight, follow along and keep reading. The first thing that broke was my phone. It vibrated once on the cafe table. Then again. Then kept going until the screen dimmed from heat. Missed calls. No messages. That was worse. I was sitting across the street from the steel and glass tower, watching black sedans line the curb, watching the German delegation step out with the kind of calm you only get when the numbers are already done. Upstairs, the deal was supposed to close. I didn't need to be in the room to know the timing. I knew Julian's habits too well. He always left the compliance slide for last. Always treated it like a footnote. Operational efficiency, streamlined structure, clean exit from legacy overhead. Words that sounded safe until someone checked the paperwork. My phone buzzed again, then stopped. That's when I knew my name had come up. My name is Clara. I'm 42 years old. I used to be the person they brought into rooms like that when everyone else wanted to move faster than the rules allowed. I wasn't invited anymore. My badge didn't open doors. My email no longer existed. According to Human Resources, I had been restructured out 120 days ago. According to the system, I hadn't gone anywhere. I took a sip of coffee and felt it turn sour in my mouth. Across the street, the tower reflected the sky back at itself, perfect and empty. Inside, someone was realizing that the Federal Registry doesn't care about org charts or new software or whose son is holding the remote. Another vibration. This time a voicemail notification. I didn't listen. I didn't need to hear the panic to recognize it. They wouldn't have asked the question unless they already knew the answer. This story is a work of fiction created by our writing team, inspired by workplace dynamics and regulatory realities. I folded my hands around the cup and waited. The cafe noise felt too loud, like the world hadn't noticed what had just shifted. Somewhere above me, a screen would have changed, a name would have appeared, an empty chair would have mattered for the first time if I no longer existed at the company. Why did the system still belong to me? My phone lit up again. This time, I picked it up. I didn't answer. Upstairs, they were learning what it meant to save money the wrong way. The meeting wasn't called to discuss me. That was the first lie. Julian stood at the head of the table with the remote in his hand. Jacket off. Sleeves rolled like he was about to build something instead of tear it down. The slide behind him was clean. One number in the corner, bolded. We saved $100,000, he said, tapping the screen, not looking at me, not needing to, by removing a department that slowed us down. A few people shifted. No one pushed back. He clicked again. A flow chart replaced the number. Boxes. Arrows. A logo I didn't recognize. Compliance doesn't create revenue. It counts lines. This does both. The logo sat there, bright and cheap. An off-the-shelf artificial intelligence tool with a subscription price lower than my team's coffee budget. Someone near the window smiled. Someone else nodded. I waited for the pause, the moment where someone would ask how the tool handled federal filings or escalation thresholds or conflict reporting. It never came. Julian kept going. This isn't personal. It's efficiency. My chair felt smaller than it had that morning. I stayed quiet because silence was the only thing in the room that hadn't been rehearsed. Human resources sat 2 seats away. Hands folded, eyes down. Legal didn't look up from their notes. When the slide deck ended, Julian glanced around like he'd just finished a favor. Questions I didn't raise my hand. I gathered my notebook, slid my pen inside, and stood. No one stopped me. No one asked where the safeguards went or who signed off on replacing them. Outside my office, a cardboard box waited. Inside it, I placed the blue regulatory binder last, the one with the tabs I'd labeled myself, the one that tracked decisions, exceptions, signatures. I set it neatly on my desk instead. I wanted it visible. I wanted someone to have to choose not to open it. How much is a reputation worth when someone else is cutting costs by the time I reach the elevator? My access badge didn't work. A polite beep. A red light. A security guard pretended not to notice. My phone buzzed as the doors closed. A calendar invite disappeared. Then another. By the time I stepped into the lobby, my email had stopped syncing. They erased my office quickly. Too quickly. And that speed, the confidence of it pressed in on me harder than the number on Julian's slide ever had. The confirmation didn't come from a person. It came from a screen. I logged in using an old bookmark I hadn't deleted yet. The page loaded slower than I remembered, like it was deciding whether to recognize me. Then my name appeared at the top. Unchanged. Same designation. Same authority. Active. I refreshed. It stayed. My badge didn't open doors anymore. My email bounced, but the Federal Compliance Registry still listed me as the primary authority. No replacement. No end date. No transition note. I called Human Resources first. The line rang longer than it used to. That was legal. Came back through the receiver after a pause. They handle filings. Legal answered on the 3rd ring. A voice I knew, clipped and careful. HR should have submitted the update. So no one did. Another pause. Shorter this time. Your access was removed. That wasn't the question. Silence stretched just enough to become an answer. Removing a name from the registry costs money? It requires board approval, paperwork, time. Someone had decided none of that was worth it. It was easier to lock me out and leave the record untouched. Cheaper, quieter. They wanted the protection without the person. An unpaid legal shield. My phone lit up with an internal number I still recognized. Legal again. The tone had changed. Lower. More contained. We'll clean it up next cycle. Next cycle was months away. Months where my name absorbed risk while someone else took credit for speed. If the system failed, whose signature would regulators call first? I need written confirmation. I said, a breath on the other end. There's nothing to confirm. Then put that in writing. The line went dead. I sat there longer than I meant to, watching the page as if it might blink and correct itself. It didn't. The system was doing exactly what it was designed to do, assign responsibility to the last person officially standing. My phone buzzed again. A calendar request from legal. Marked urgent. No details. Just a time and a subject line that made my jaw tighten. Responsibility confirmation. I didn't decline it. I didn't accept it either. I closed the app and took a screenshot of the registry instead, saving it twice. Whatever was coming next. They were already choosing their version of the story. The call came after midnight. Not late enough to be an emergency. Early enough to feel deliberate. I let it ring once before answering. The voice on the other end hadn't changed. Still calm, still measured. The same voice that used to correct my drafts with a red pen and a nod. You should check your email. He said, no greeting, no preamble. A document was already there. Responsibility confirmation. Clean title. Neutral language. Too neutral. Sign it. He continued, this doesn't have to get messy. I'll arrange compensation. Quietly. I opened the file. The dates jumped out before the paragraphs did. Old dates, wrong dates. A neat attempt to pull the present backward and make it look continuous. Backdated responsibility dressed up as administrative cleanup. You're asking me to take ownership? I said, a pause. Short, controlled. To acknowledge continuity. Julian's new system sat between the lines. The missed checks, the automated approvals, every corner cut wrapped into a document that would make it all mine. You were always thorough, he added. This protects everyone, including him. I scrolled once more, slower this time. The language was careful, but the weight was obvious. One signature would transfer months of risk onto my name and seal it with intent. They weren't asking me to help. They were asking me to disappear properly. How long did they think I'd trade my future for the comfort of their timeline? I need time. I said, you don't. Came back immediately. The first crack. The board meets tomorrow. I closed the document, hovered over the reply field, then moved my thumb to the other option and pressed delete. The call ended without goodbye. I sat there longer than I should have, watching the empty inbox refresh like it might argue with me. It didn't. Silence settled in. Heavier now, but cleaner. My phone vibrated again. Not a call. A calendar alert. Auto-generated, marked mandatory, same subject line, same pressure, different tactic. I took another screenshot, backed it up, and set my phone face down on the table. If they wanted an answer, they were going to have to wait. And waiting, I knew, was the one thing their system couldn't afford. I didn't announce anything. I didn't set an out-of-office reply. I packed light and left before sunrise. Phone on airplane mode. Notifications stripped down to nothing that could pull me back by accident. They kept trying anyway. A voicemail arrived while I was still in transit. Then another. Different numbers. Same urgency. Calendar holds stacked on top of each other like they could block time I no longer offered. I let them sit. Availability had been doing too much work for them already. I knew the timetable without checking. Final diligence window. Board alignment. Signing prep. The moment when someone asks for a confirmation no software can generate, I also knew exactly when my silence would stop being inconvenient and start being dangerous. I wasn't breaking anything. I wasn't touching their files or logging into their systems. I was doing the one thing they hadn't planned for. Nothing. A message finally pushed through from legal, flagged high priority, 3 sentences, all pressure, no facts. A request framed as a reminder. Then a reminder framed as an expectation. The language shifted just enough to tell me they were running out of room. I set the phone face down and counted to 10, then 20. I imagined the meeting rooms filling, the questions circling closer to the edge they didn't want to name yet. If absence was neutral, why did it feel like leverage by the second day? The tone changed again. Shorter, colder, less polite. A different voice tried. Then another, each one assuming I'd flinch first. I didn't. Compliance isn't about presence. It's about validation at the exact moment risk turns real. Remove that, and the structure keeps moving until it doesn't know how to stop. Late that night, a new alert broke through the silence. Not a request this time. An internal memo forwarded by mistake. My name sat at the bottom, typed where a signature should have been. I took a screenshot and saved it to a secure folder. Then I powered the phone down completely. They were improvising now. And improvisation, at this stage, meant someone was about to make a choice that couldn't be undone. I learned about the signature from a forwarded memo that wasn't meant for me. The subject line was bland, compliance alignment. The body was worse tight, reassuring, full of verbs that sounded finished. At the bottom sat my name, rendered in the company's digital script. Clean, confident, wrong. A second page followed, marked for board review. The language shifted there. Firmer, declarative. All compliance matters are confirmed. Past tense, closed. Julian didn't need my presence anymore. He needed my shape. Another file came through minutes later, copied too widely to hide the mistake. Someone asked whether the confirmation covered the last 4 months. A reply landed fast. Yes, verified. No attachment. No registry reference. Just the word. Dropped like a doorstop. I watched the timestamp stack. I watched the certainty grow. Confidence, unchecked, starts to feel like permission. A call came in from an unfamiliar extension. The voice didn't bother with pleasantries. The board needs assurance. This puts everyone at ease. The pause after that sentence carried an expectation. Agreement, gratitude, compliance. They weren't asking anymore. They were narrating. I opened the registry again and refreshed. My name remained active. Same authority, same exposure. The system doesn't care who typed what, it cares who owns it. If he believed no one still checked federal records by hand, what else did he think had been automated away? Another message arrived. This one's sharper. We're aligned. Don't complicate this, I saved everything. The memo, the headers, the routing paths. Then I locked the folder and mirrored it off device. Quiet work, careful work, the kind Julian thought belonged to a different era. The next notification wasn't an email. It was a meeting ad with a title that tried to sound routine and failed. Final confirmation. I declined it without comment. Somewhere, a board was being told the risk had been handled. Somewhere else, a lie was settling into place. Brittle and visible. And once lies like that set, they don't flex. They crack. The call came through marked private, the kind of ring that assumes it will be answered. I picked up on the third vibration. The voice on the other end wasn't the one I remembered from board meetings. It had lost its edge. It rushed, then stopped, as if the words were bumping into each other on the way out. We need you, he said. Not my name, not an apology. Just need. I could hear the room behind him, chairs shifting. A low murmur that cut off the moment he turned away. Someone was counting time out loud. Someone else was reminding him that the delegation was waiting. They won't sign. He continued, not without live confirmation from the compliance authority. A breath, too quick. This can be fixed. I let the silence stretch long enough to change the shape of the conversation. Power does that when it moves. They're asking for you. He added, softer now. Video or voice, just a confirmation. I pictured the screen upstairs. The signature. The memo. My name doing work I hadn't agreed to. I pictured Julian standing where certainty used to live. What does it sound like when a man realizes his leverage has expired? According to the employment documents your son signed? I said, keeping my voice even. I haven't existed at that company for 120 days. The line went quiet, not disconnected, held. That doesn't matter. He tried. This is about the company. It matters. I replied, it's the only thing that does. He shifted tactics. Promises followed. Titles. A return framed as reconciliation. None of it landed. The words were arriving too late, stacked on top of each other like they could build a bridge back to where he stood. I need you to understand what's at stake. He said, I do. Another pause. Shorter this time. Desperate. If you don't help us, this becomes very public. I didn't answer that. I didn't need to. I have to go, I said, and ended the call before he could find another angle. My phone stayed quiet after that. No follow-up. No second attempt. Upstairs. The clock had stopped moving for them. For me, it had just started. I walked into the lobby and stopped short of the elevators. The security desk looked up, then away. My badge wasn't active anymore, but no one asked me to leave. The glass walls carried sound too well. Raised voices from above, a meeting unraveling in real time. Footsteps hit the marble hard, too fast to be calm. The CEO came first, jacket half on, tie pulled loose like it had betrayed him. Julian followed, face flushed, jaw tight, moving with the kind of energy that had nowhere left to go. "There you are," Julian snapped, closing the distance. "You did this on purpose." I didn't step back. I reached into my bag and took out the folded printout instead. The registry page. Crisp, dated. My name still anchored to the role they claimed no longer existed. He laughed once, sharp and brittle. "That's outdated." I unfolded the page all the way and held it between us. It refreshed this morning. The CEO's eyes dropped. "He didn't touch it? He didn't need to. You could have fixed this." Julian pushed. One call, one line. Fixing it would have meant lying. I answered. "You already did that part." His voice rose. Heads turned. Phones came out. Accountability has a sound when it arrives. And it isn't polite. "You ran a $285 million machine without brakes." I said, keeping my voice low. "I didn't remove them. I was the only one who knew they were already gone." Behind the glass railing above us, movement stilled. The German team had gathered along the mezzanine, watching without speaking. One of them lifted a phone. Another closed a folder with finality that carried farther than shouting. What does accountability look like when everyone is watching a woman in a dark suit leaned over the rail and spoke once? Clear and unhurried. "We're withdrawing." Effective immediately. No argument followed. No bargaining. The words landed and stayed where they fell. Julian turned back to me, searching for something that might still work. There was nothing left to offer. I folded the registry page again and put it away. The elevators dinged behind me, empty and waiting, but I didn't step inside. I didn't need to go anywhere yet. The pressure had shifted, and it wasn't mine to carry anymore. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces, each one heavier than the last. An unfamiliar number lit up my phone the next morning. The voice on the line was controlled, practiced. "We're opening an inquiry into recent filings." No accusation yet, just confirmation that the record had been noticed, that the paperwork Julian thought no one read had been read carefully, line by line. By noon, the market reacted, not with panic, with distance. The credit desk called it a downgrade. Short, clean, no emotion attached. Value slid quietly, the way confidence leaves a room when no one is watching. Julian didn't call me. His name surfaced anyway, threaded through messages I wasn't meant to see but received all the same. Phrases like personal exposure and individual liability replaced his old vocabulary of speed and scale. Someone forwarded an internal note by mistake, then tried to recall it. Too late. The language was there. So was his signature. How fast can a company fall once the truth is documented? Another call came in that afternoon. This one waited for me to speak first. I didn't. "We're reassessing our North American strategy," the woman said at last. Her accent was familiar now. Calm. Exact. "We need someone independent. Someone who understands where systems break before they do." She didn't promise safety. She didn't offer flattery. She named the role and paused, letting the weight of it settle between us. "I won't clean up anyone's mess quietly." I said, "That's why we called." I agreed to a meeting. Nothing more. The silence after felt earned. Later, a final message slipped through from an old address. No greeting. Just a sentence asking if any of this had been necessary. I didn't answer. Necessity had never been part of their calculations before. I closed the thread and set the phone down. Outside, the day kept moving. Inside the company I'd left behind, something essential had burned away, leaving only what could survive inspection. The office they gave me faced the river. Glass, quiet, a desk that didn't wobble when I leaned on it. The first meeting ended early because no one tried to rush the checklist. When someone asked for a shortcut, the room waited for the answer instead of assuming it. An email slipped in late afternoon from an address I didn't recognize at first. Then I did. Short, defensive, He wanted to know why I'd been so ruthless. He wrote as if speed had failed him and language might save him instead. I closed the message without replying. Another window popped up with a draft report open on my screen. Names aligned with responsibilities. Dates matched actions. No ambiguity left to hide behind. The work felt familiar in my hands, steady and exact. When a director pushed back, I slid the registry across the table and waited. The push ended there. Later, a junior analyst hovered at my door, unsure. I nodded him in. He pointed to a line item and asked if it really mattered. I showed him how one unchecked line turns into a chain reaction. He listened. He wrote it down. That night, as the building thinned out, I reopened the old insult in my head and set it where it belonged. I never made the company money. I decided whether the money they made could legally belong to them. Here's the lesson I earned the hard way. Boundaries are not attitude problems. They are safety systems. If you remove them to look efficient, you don't move faster, you remove the brakes. And when something fails, the record remembers who was responsible. I shut the file and powered down. My name wasn't a ghost anymore. It didn't need to be loud. It only needed to be accurate. Thanks for staying with this story. If it hit close to home, I'd like to hear what part stayed with you. Drop a comment and tell me. If you want more stories like this, well, follow along. I'll keep telling them the way I lived them: clear lines, firm exits, and no signatures I don't own.